Welcome to episode 214 of Sports Geek. On this week's CEO series episode, I chat with Dave Donaghy from the Melbourne Storm.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who's ready for your questions in Sports Geek Nation Slack, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and I am available on the Sports Geek Nation Slack. If you ever have a question, you can simply send me one there. Hit me up in the DMs or just tag me in a question. I'm actually looking forward to producing a new podcast format in the next couple of weeks, which is going to be launching on the back of your questions, primarily out of a result of the success the Ask Me Anything sessions have had in the Sports Geek Nation Slack. So if you haven't joined Sports Geek Nation, I'd love for you to do so. Getting some really good content shared and conversations happening in there. Multitude of different people sharing information and experience. We've obviously got the AMA channel where we've got members taking on board and taking questions. The digital channel is very active. Esports channel remains active. The tech channel starting to get a bit more activity. So thank you for the people who are in there already. And if you want to join, simply go to sportsgeeknation.com. If you've got any questions, you can contact me anytime, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or as I said, at Sean Callanan on most platforms. Before we kick into this CEO series episode with Dave Donaghy, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing recently in athlete digital training. And it's probably, always, it's funny when people say, when should you do it? Should you do it at the start of the season, end of the season, when there's training? It's a little bit of an ongoing thing. And so we've got a few different, I've got a few different presentations and education pieces that are ideal for either playing groups themselves as a large group or the coaches who need to understand the digital platforms their players are on, to help them understand what best practice is, how athletes can protect themselves in the ever-changing digital world. So there's a few different options there around helping them to review and understand the latest trends on different platforms, how to find out what social media platform works for you, what content fans are looking for. And also there's probably a little piece in there, and I saw an NFL job recently advertised for the NFL where they were producing content for the players. So there's a bit more scope coming in now where teams or agencies are actually producing the content and the players are just executing it. So if you're interested and you would like to help your team, help your athletes, help your key partners and key brand ambassadors get out there, please just simply go to sportsgeekhq.com social media athlete training, and there'll be some details there on the site. But as always, you can reach out. Now, to get to my interview with Dave Donaghy, Dave is the CEO of Melbourne Storm in the National Rugby League. Last year, they were premiers, and we recorded this just a few days after them unfortunately losing the grand final, but it was a mighty effort to be back in the grand final. So runners-up back-to-back is very hard to do in the NRL. And for the people who aren't across the NRL, just a bit of backstory. Cooper Cronk, who Dave talks about as one of the big three of the Melbourne Storm, left Melbourne Storm last year after that premiership, and he went to Sydney, who unfortunately won the NRL game from the Storm's point of view. So there's a bit of discussion about Cooper and how big a part of Melbourne Storm's history he was. And then we also talk about Craig Bellamy and his long-time coach contract negotiations that come up every couple of years. And then we actually finished the episode talking about what was a big controversy point in NRL Grand Final week, which was the tribunal hearing for Billy Slater playing his last game, and some of the backwards and forwards that were there. So we sort of just tackle a tiny little piece of that at the end of the interview, but I'm sure you'll like it. This is my chat with Dave Donaghy from the Melbourne Storm. Very happy to be here at Amy Park, home of the Melbourne Storm, with CEO Dave Donaghy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Just to get started, you're currently in the CEO role at the Melbourne Storm, but how did you get your start in sports?
About a decade ago, I suppose, or a little bit longer than that. I actually started out when I finished uni, so started as a journalist. So I did politics and journalism at the University of Queensland. Like most kids, when you're that age, you have absolutely no idea what you want to be when you grow up. Some probably say that I still don't, but for me, it was being a journalist straight out of university was a great grounding. The ability to actually communicate to so many people on so many different levels, but also grow your contact base.
So were you on a beat? Were you on a particular, I'm a big listener of Hutchie and Damo on the sounding board, and they talk about their days working the desks of different parts of the business. What were you doing in that space?
I actually used to work with Damo at the Herald Sun, but I started out at Australian Associated Press. I was a cadet there, I think in my third or fourth year of university, and really covered everything with AAP. So I did a little bit of sport, some courts, Indigenous affairs, some politics. Went up to North Queensland and ran a bureau up there for 12 months, and then ended up in Melbourne working at the Herald Sun, covering sport, mostly rugby league, and that was where I got to know the Melbourne Storm, obviously, and Craig Bellamy, Frank Panisi at the time. Look, Storm had a few issues end of 2008. Cameron Smith was suspended. I think Craig said a few things that he regretted at the time, and they need someone to come in and give them some assistance with media. Look, and at that point within my career, I knew I didn't want to be a journalist my whole life. And I knew I didn't want to pigeonhole myself within media. So I said I would, but I said I'd like to build out or flesh out a role within football administration too. So it was a joint role. I was footy ops and media manager. So I was effectively Frank Panisi's right-hand man.
Yeah, so it was dual role. It wasn't just you're working on the media side, you're working also on the footy ops side to give them some training and advice and best practice on how to approach media and get the message out.
Oh no, it was more than that. It was football logistics. Their training working with the S&C guys with the training programs, getting those out. A lot of admin work really within the football department. Pretty much anything that Frank didn't want to do, and I found that as another great area for me to hone my craft, to learn my skills, and get a better understanding of how football departments work. And at that point, a decade ago, within the Australian sports landscape, football clubs are really small businesses, and people did do multiple roles, and that was great for me because I've never wanted to pigeonhole myself into a certain area, and that allowed me to gain a greater understanding of the wider business, plus work with some really great people, Frank and Craig in particular.
And so from there, you left the Storm, went up to Brisbane in a role at the Lions?
Yeah, so spent 2 years at Storm. We went through the 2010 salary cap period, and that was challenging, but also quite rewarding professionally. But very personally and emotionally challenging for all that were involved at the time. Got through that. End of 2010, you could see light at the end of the tunnel. So took an opportunity with the AFL. Was sent up to Brisbane, the Brisbane Lions, and spent 3 years there in a wonderful world of AFL with some fantastic titles. I think I was general manager, communications and stakeholder engagement, or something like that.
That's correct. I've checked that on your LinkedIn. That's
on
exactly
my CV.
Right.
That was.
Was there similarities? Because the Storm in Melbourne in an AFL town, and then you go to Brisbane working for an AFL team in an NRL town. Was there some similarities in that piece?
Oh, very much so. And all the challenges both clubs face. All the challenger teams in the frontier markets. They all share very similar challenges around both from a commercial perspective, from a football perspective, around recruiting players and ensuring that when players come to your market or to your city, that you're getting them integrated within your city as quickly as possible, making them feel not just them but their families, whether they're families that are here and they're more mature players, or whether they're families as in mum and dad back home, that they're as as comfortable as possible, because there's a real responsibility on clubs and myself to ensure that mum and dad, if they're letting their son go for the first time, that they feel a level of comfort with who they're effectively passing their child on to.
Yeah, I mean, discussed the same thing when talking to Kurt at the Broncos and Anthony at the Lions, and just the dynamics of that market and how big the Broncos are in that market. It's definitely that challenger brand piece that the Lions face. But do you then came back from Brisbane and came back to Melbourne, and in a role strategy and communications director? How had the Storm changed in your time away?
There wasn't too many staff that I knew. Some of the football staff was still the same, and some of the players. There were at least some familiar faces, but from a whole club perspective, I suppose with the new owners that acquired the club from News Limited, there was a real focus on growing the business. Yep. Working with Mark Evans, who was the CEO at the time, and Bart Campbell, the chair, who's still the chair now. There was certainly a mandate to focus on the growth, on the commercial growth and success of the business. So for us, it meant really focusing on our cost base, really looking at where we could improve certain areas of the business, generate some quick wins, but also look at longer term strategic thinking around. There might be some initiatives or some strategies we need to put in place now. We're not going to see the fruits of that labour immediately, but down the track we will, and pleasingly we're starting to.
Yep. And so you've spoken a few times about not being pigeonholed and not want to stay in media. When did you what steps did you take, and when did you start looking at potentially saying I want to be a CEO at a club level?
It was something I probably hadn't really thought about, to be honest. When Bart originally approached me, I think this was in 2012, and mentioned that at some point in the next 1 to 2 years, they were doing the due diligence on Storm. They were looking at potentially purchasing the club from News at that point, and he just made mentioned to me that the longer term there may be opportunities there that you work hard enough, which this club's built on. You demonstrate that level of work ethic, and you're able to broaden your skill set, and obviously the board and the directors like you, which always helps. The opportunity may exist to grow in your career, and Mark Evans, who was the CEO at the time, I learned plenty from Mark, and Mark was only going to be short term at Storm. He was effectively commuting from London, so he was spending some time here and some time back home with his family, and I think 18 months into that role, Mark decided that he wanted to head back to the UK, and the opportunity arose, and pleasingly the board, and they didn't have to do that. It was a real, I suppose, a courageous decision by them. It was a 32-year-old guy who's never been a CEO before. These guys are very successful businessmen, putting the longer term direction of the club in the hands of an untested guy like myself, and I was very thankful that they did. And their comment to me, Sean, at the time was that they're all successful themselves, and at different points of their career, people have given them opportunities, and they've provided me with great support on the way through, and they've all been wonderful mentors for me. So
did you have sometimes when you get into a new role, there's the impetus to got to make the changes to be seen to be seen to be doing something? Like, what was there a particular focus when you came into the role, or was it you were on the right path and it was a bit of staying that path and forging ahead?
I think over the 18 months prior, we'd done some really solid work around controlling our cost base, and looking at certain parts of the business. I suppose a sporting club, it has many dynamics, but it is quite a simple business when you look at the revenue areas of it, and also your cost base. Your greatest cost base are your players and your talent and your staff. Yep. You've got your stadium and your rental for your tenancy, which we're sitting in at the moment. It's a beautiful stadium, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
So for us, looking at those areas and then focusing really on our commercial part of the business. For us, we're a football club, obviously first and foremost, and our focus has been on our product and ensuring that we've obviously had some challenges. We knew that while we'd love them to be the Benjamin Button of rugby league, the Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, and Cameron Smith, at some point we're going to retire.
Yeah,
you'd have to be blind Freddie not to be aware of that and start making plans for that. So we set about mapping that out. We set about mapping out a team that could challenge for premierships on a sustainable basis, that was compliant, which we were at the time and still are. And then the next focus has been on growing our consumer base. I'm strong of the view that for us to be competitive commercially in this market, we had to grow our consumer base first and foremost. And over that 3-year period, we've gone from 15,000 members to 25,000 plus now.
Yep.
I'm confident that from that 15,000 mark over within a 5-year period, we'll have doubled that. And that's where now's the right time to really put a stake in the ground and set a target. And for us, it's saying, the aspiration for Melbourne Storm is that we want to go from 25,000 at this point to 50,000 members within 5 years, and that'll put us in in that AFL club membership territory, which is important in this market when you're talking commercial revenues.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're in a space in this precinct with Collingwood across the road and the Victory that have got large. And it's very much a membership culture. I've talked about it many times in the podcast in Melbourne. Like, Storm's got one of the strongest brands across the Eastern Seaboard. It's pretty unique because you've got a really strong presence in Melbourne, but New South Wales and Queensland is it's a really strong market because that's where the NRL is at its strongest. How do you position brands to sponsors from a Storm point of view?
Well, and it's New Zealand as well. And it's exactly that. Your core audience for your television markets are on the East Coast, and for us, we feel we're one of those very few sporting organisations in Melbourne that can unite Melbourne. We're and when we certainly want all of our fans and our players and our staff to have the AFL team in this market, but we want everyone to have their rugby league team, and obviously that's easy when you're a player or a staff member. That's a prerequisite. But for all our members and fans, and for the wider sports community in Melbourne, and the generalist theatre goer that wants to be entertained, we want them to have. If you're from Melbourne, we want your rugby league club to be the Melbourne Storm. So that's our proposition that we take with us. Pleasingly, the metrics that come back demonstrate considerable growth, and we spoke about the membership target there and the membership growth. But it was a Roy Morgan research piece done not long ago, which said I think we had 1.05 million fans across the country, which puts us number 2 behind the Broncos. We've got quite a unique reach where we're very popular in New Zealand as well. For us, our TV audiences, last year, this year, are circa 20 million. We've got the largest social media following of any professional sports team in Melbourne. Which is quite remarkable. But for us, there's been a real focus on it because it allows us to have a direct conversation with our fans, and therefore it allows our partners to have a direct conversation with our fans as well. And there's a great affinity between our fans and partners of Storm. There's some really strong research we've been able to be commissioned that demonstrate the level of I suppose
affinity and loyalty.
Loyalty around that. If you partner Melbourne Storm, our fans are far more likely to want to do business with your company or spend money with your company, which is a really I suppose a strong proposition for us to take to the market.
And the challenge and the opportunity going forward is, like you said before, for the international audience. You've had 3 of the all-time greats, on the roster with Cronk, who left last year, Billy Slater, who just retired, and Cameron Smith, a legend of the game. You've now got to sustain that. What does the Storm look like in 5 years? Because Cam's not going to keep playing forever and ever and ever. and make sure you make those connections with those fans now and lock them in as following the Storm with the talent you've got coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, again, with those guys, you're right, and they're incredible. They're impossible to replace. So I think for whether it's staff or coaches or players internally within here, the people that do end up replacing those guys just can't be compared to those three players, because they are just legends of the game.
Yeah.
All three will probably go down as immortals at some point. Certainly, Cam and Billy are going to be immortalised in Melbourne with statues. So,
well, that's right. They got announced just earlier this week.
Yeah,
that there's going to be a couple of statues. Have you spoken to the guy who did the Ronaldo bust? And mate, did you see that when that came out?
No, I'll be Googling it straight after.
Well, yeah, we'll share it with you, but don't hire him. He was the guy that did the Ronaldo bust, and it looked like a cartoon version of him. Like, that's the biggest challenge now, to get the right sculptor so it actually looks like, you don't want to go up there and go, that doesn't look like Billy and Cam, but that'll be good, because it actually will start giving Storm some history, because you're still a relatively young club. Like, if you look around this town, and you've got Melbourne Footy Club around the corner, and they're 130, and Collingwood's 125. You're in your 20th year. It's still relatively young club.
And I think that again reinforces the upside of Storm. It's our 20th year this year, and we're celebrating our 20 years, and we're at 25,000 members. We've got some wonderful partners already on board, and we've had some incredible success. And I look ahead to the future, and I won't be here in 120 years' time. But when you compare yourselves to some of these other clubs that have been around for a long, long time, you start thinking, right, well, what's actually possible? And I don't think there's any ceiling that you could put on this football club when you're in a city of 4.5 or 5 million people. You've had some success. You've been able to commercially put some solid platforms in place. You're really well positioned for growth, and for us, it's about ensuring that we bring the right people in the business. We continue to enhance the culture, and we really drive, and we drive results, and we're held accountable for that. So that's our goal for the next little period, and we're looking forward to continuing that work in the off season.
Another thing that you've ventured into is your partnership with the Sunshine Coast University of Sunshine Coast, with the Sunshine Coast Lightning in the Super Netball. How is that working? How does it operate from a Storm and Sunshine Coast for you guys? And I mean, it's obviously been very successful on court from a success point of view, winning 2 titles. Has it affected this business, and sort of how are the pieces working together for you guys?
Oh, it's been great for us, Sean. It's when we announced it 2 years ago, I think now, and the Netball Australia were brave enough, I suppose, to bring Storm and Collingwood and GWS into the fold. And at the time, we said, we've spent almost 20 years providing young men with a pathway and opportunity to build careers as athletes, and how great is it now that we get to provide the same opportunity for young women? And to do that in a secondary market, if you like, it certainly assists with broadening the commercial appeal. We've had a lot of partners that have not only supported Storm, but have gone across and supported Lightning. We've been able to expand our government networks, and pleasingly there was a state government investment into expanding the stadium up there of I believe $7 million on top of the $12 million the Victorian government provided for a state rugby league centre of excellence down here, and the $1.1 million commitment from the federal Labor opposition at this stage, which we'd love to be matched by the government at the moment. But it's been hugely successful both on and off court, and we provided Storm some expertise, some strategic thinking, some shared services, whether it's the membership or the partnership space. But they've got a real,
they are their own team.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that they had their own identity. That's why it wasn't the Sunshine Coast Storm that was set up. It was we wanted to keep the connection, obviously, hence the Lightning. But we wanted to ensure that, if you're on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, you might not be a Storm member or a Storm fan. So for them to then be able to call Lightning their own and be their own team and really we're the safety blanket. So, between us and the university, who are great partners, and also the Sunshine Coast Council, you've got to recognise the contribution that they've made and their vision, I suppose, around wanting to see a national sports franchise based out of that area. I think for that area, a rugby league, at the moment, a rugby league or an AFL team is probably a bridge too far.
Yep. And that's the thing for the people who don't know and don't know their Australian geography. Sunshine Coast is in Queensland. It's quite unique, because GWS and Collingwood have obviously set up shop with a netball team next to their AFL team, but it's a lot of shared facilities. They're using the same gym and the same operation space and those kind of things. But yeah, you've got a couple of thousand Ks between the two operations.
Yeah, and we couldn't have done it by ourselves, obviously, so that's where the university's got some wonderful facilities up there. And I think, universities in Australia, it's a bit of an untapped opportunity for sportsmen and women to further their careers if that's their intention. So it's been as I said, it's been a huge success. Their first year was effectively a break-even proposition, which is quite remarkable for a startup.
Yep.
But also,
especially in sport,
absolutely. And they won the inaugural title, and they backed that up and went one better than Storm this year, and went back to back. So they've had the coach up there, Nolene Tarua. She's now the New Zealand national coach as well. The Danielle Smith, the CEO up there, has been able to convince her to stick around for another year, and she's such a she's the Craig Bellamy of netball. She's such a terrific coach.
That's a pretty high compliment.
Well, she's a great. Well, maybe Craig Bellamy's the Nolene Tarua of rugby league, because she's a wonderful leader, and her coaching has been obviously very well received, and some of the players and the individual growth and development of some of the players that they've had up there has just been remarkable. So I take my hat off to all of them. They're a small, nimble, agile organisation, but they're doing great things.
And is that part of that broader strategy for the Storm overall to extend that fan base and that audience? It's not necessarily about making a Lightning fan a Storm fan and vice versa, but having these separate fan groups. And is there there's something on the roadmap to say, well, we could be looking at other teams. We're seeing the Adelaide Crows go into esports and baseball. Is that something that's on your radar and potentially looking forward?
I think in the short term, it's probably more consolidation. Yep. But without doubt, we continue to have approaches from external parties around those opportunities. And, we judge those on their merits. And, there are, there's always interesting opportunities that are arising when you're Melbourne Storm, but we're not wedded to a strategy around continued growth with other sporting organisations or esports at this stage. But as we consolidate and just take a deep breath after the season that's been, we're certainly going to explore those further.
You mentioned Craig Bellamy there, a legend of the game, been coach of the Storm since 2003. I think every time his contract is up, the articles that come out of the Herald Sun get more and more, or even the Courier Mail. You've resigned Craig. How important is Craig to this place, and what was it like trying to get that deal done with the media frenzy, and with your journo background, knowing that those column inches have to be produced? What was it like internally trying to get that deal done and keeping Craig on board?
Well, there's two stories that always come out at contract time. Normally with this matter, one is Craig's retiring.
Yep.
Well, this is going to be his last contract, and two, Craig's going back to the Broncos. So they always seem to roll out this time of the year. It's a little bit like when you're heading into the finals at the NRL and Storms. There's something either related to wrestling or whatnot. So it just happens, and we understand that. For us, I think around that is ensuring that you take all of that as white noise, and the conversations you're having are direct and honest and upfront, which they certainly were in this case. And we were able to. Craig and I go back, as I said. We go back to 2006. When I moved down from Queensland at the end of 2013, I stayed with him in Wendy for 2 or 3 months. So they were fortunate enough to take me into their house, and we've got they're at my wedding. We've been able to build a great relationship and a friendship over a long period of time. So, look, at no point was I really overly concerned outside of having a few people in your ear that that he was going. But look, for us, we always say that you got to put your family first, and I understand there was some discussions that Craig needed to have, and I was just pleased, obviously delighted with the outcome that he's extended his stay at the Storm. I'm sure you've got some American listeners. He's like the Belichick of rugby league. I think he spent some time over there with Bill and Parcells as well, and he he's always challenging himself. He's just turned 60. But he's not a closed book. He always wants to learn. He's always willing to take new ideas, and he's always providing his staff with that autonomy to go and do their jobs. He wants them to.
I think the Belichick analogy is good, and even the fact that while going through a grand final week, and Collingwood was doing the same, he came over and spoke to the Collingwood boys, even though he was going through his own grand final week. It's just that's his nature of being part of the coaching fraternity.
Yeah, it is, and he's had plenty of. Or he's been able to build some great relationships with a lot of elite and professional coaches over a long period of time, and it's a great support network for them all. And I suppose it would get quite lonely in that position, so it's important that they're able to bounce ideas and thoughts off each other. And look, he's done a remarkable job here for a long time. You asked what his contribution's been to Storm, and I think all of those guys between him and Cooper and Billy and Cameron and guys before that, Robbie Kearns, Tuera Nikau, Matt Guy, they've all played such a huge role in helping put Storm on the map. This is one of the most competitive sporting markets in the world. There's 17 professional teams based in Melbourne, so it's hugely cluttered. But his hunger and his work ethic, and I think one trait that he's got which gets overlooked quite a bit is his level of empathy and his ability to connect with his players and have them actually have them buy into what he's trying to drill down throughout the entire team and the football program. That's a real, I think, in my view, is quite a rare trait. Yeah, especially those that are genuine about it, which he is. And
it does seem to be the hot trend in coaching, at least in this part of the world. You've seen Luke Beveridge go through that. Damien in the AFL side, Nathan Buckley getting a lot of plaudits over the last 12 months for that. But it's something that Craig's done over many, many years.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's natural for him. He grew up in country New South Wales. Very much, he's a guy that's got those old school country values. The please, thank yous. Wants his players to be demonstrating a level of respect. Wants his players to be treating people how they want to be treated, and he ensures that they're accountable for that too, which is even more important. So, look, he's a terrific guy. He's still doing a great job as head coach here, and I'm not convinced that even though I'm sure it'll be written that this contract will be his last, I'm not convinced at all that it will be. So he's
well, it's a little bit of speaking to the Golden State Warriors when they adopted the phrase "strength in numbers," that came effectively off Steve Kerr's whiteboard, and it was sort of adopted by the whole club and then the whole fan base. This year you guys went with, we go again, which just speaks of, what Craig would be saying. And then it just sort of work its way through the whole club?
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're in an organisation, a sports organisation, you want it to be authentic, because your fans or your members they're buying into what your footy team, I suppose. Ultimately, it's a product they see, so what they're seeing on the field. And from a marketing point of view, and actually, if you can extract and draw out what the football program's talking about, and then put that in a consumer-facing message, it's so powerful. And it's so powerful because it's authentic and it's real. and he's probably a really good marketer, Craig. He just doesn't quite realise it. But so too is Frank Panisi. He's terrific at that, and he's able to. I think he's a frustrated marketer in a football director's body, but he really enjoys that, and I think that's a real unique thing about this place. Our football program's based right alongside our commercial program, so. Everyone's, if the coach and I were in a spat and really wanted to let everyone know, we could actually yell at each other across the office, and everyone would be able to see it and hear it. But that provides such a huge benefit to the culture of the organisation that everyone's so close together.
And speaking about, I guess, bringing the fans in and making them feel like they're part of the story, you recently just announced the Our Storm project, and you're investigating the fan ownership model, similar to what we see with the Green Bay Packers, because it is unique here in this market. I mean, one, to be a privately owned team is pretty unique in the Australian market, but then to look at where does fan ownership fit? What are your thoughts on that, and what are you looking to potentially find out from that?
Yeah, so we've got three shareholders at the moment. Bart Campbell's our chair as well. We've got Jerry Ryan, who many people, not only in Australia but around the world, would know, and Matt Tripp as well. So between those three guys, they've been wonderful. As I said earlier, they've been wonderful mentors for me. But when they acquired the club 5 years ago, part of the original business plan that was put down on paper was that we want to explore to the nth degree the ability for us to be able to, at some point, provide the club or sell the club or pass the club on to fans.
Yep.
So that's what we've engaged an advisory group, Greenhill, based out of Sydney, or a global firm, but based out of Sydney.
Yep.
Investment bank to support us on that, to provide us with that advice on the way through, to see whether there is a model and whether the market
wants it.
Is mature enough.
Yep.
We obviously launched that at our Player of the Year in early October, and for us, the response has been quite remarkable. We've had thousands of people register already.
Yep.
Just effectively wanting to know more about it at the appropriate time. So at the moment, it's just exploring the possibility or the likelihood of that or not. Look, if the market isn't mature enough, and I don't use the word mature enough in a derogatory sense, it's just that's the reality. If the market's not mature enough to support a concept like fan ownership at this stage, then it's business as usual. So revert back to the three shareholders and the existing board and whatnot. But there's some models which says to us that it's worth exploring. The Packers have obviously done a remarkable job in the city that they're in. South Sydney have a model whereby they're 25% owned by their fans. Yep. And both those organisations have been hugely successful. The Packers, they're unbelievable. So if you're able to,
especially if you look at their latest property development, the title town that's being developed, and again, that's a super unique model in the US. Whereas in Australia, we've got a lot of the AFL clubs are member based, and all the members feel like they've got to vote, they can vote on the board and that kind of stuff. But we're not, going down the hot takes of fans picking coaches and players and all that kind of stuff. So I wait for those blogs to come out over the next week or so when someone tries that type of hot take. But it is about that fan identity and ownership piece potentially, that someone says, I want to, I've got a mate that is a Packers shareholder, and they don't actually sell shares internationally, so he had to get someone to register for him, and he got his shareholder certificate effectively, but it was really I want to say I'm a shareholder and pass it on. And is there fan benefits, ticketing benefits? Yeah. Who knows? So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
And there's a huge emotional connection to between fans or members.
Yep.
And their football club. I remember this at the end of my first year as CEO, and I was wet behind the ears, and I actually asked our membership team to call all of our what you'd call high risk members. So members that were spending the most amount of money but hadn't come to a game.
Yep.
And every single one of those people just said, no, we've got no issue with us. We're signing on for next year, or we've already signed on for next year. We're on the rollover. We just want to support our footy club.
Yeah.
So there's a huge emotional connection between that. And for us, it's a real responsibility that we want to make sure that it's on, off field. We make our members' weekends better.
Yeah. But it's also something that you still need to be checking in with fans and making sure that they are okay. So making those calls and making sure, because if you're not having that comms with them, then it drops off and you don't know why. It's super important to keep that connection.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So I want to wrap things up. Thank you very much for your time. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I remember my first. I actually told Wayne Pearce this during grand final week, which I don't know was a good or a bad thing, bro.
Yep.
I certainly remember the first game of rugby league I saw on television, which was the 1989 grand final when Canberra beat Balmain.
Okay, yeah.
And at the time, would have been Broncos' second year, so I had no connection with the Broncos as a Queensland kid growing up there. But I remember still running off and crying under the bed when I was 5 or 6 or whatever I was, and I just had to tell Junior that the other week. So I don't think I shed as many tears as he probably did, but that's that. But I think it was either my first game of live sport was either North Sydney Oval in Sydney for some reason, or it was at it was either, I think it was ANZ actually. It was at ANZ Stadium in Brisbane at the time, which was the old QE2. It was a Broncos home game.
Yep. Okay. You would have been a few sports events in your time as a journalist, also working. Is there a favourite food memory you have, or is there a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
Hot chips.
Hot chips?
I think it's the Irish in me. I'm a sucker for a hot chip. Sean.
Sauce on the side or any?
No, just give me a potato and I'm a happy man. I would much rather sit in the outer eating a bucket of hot chips than I'm in seventh heaven if I'm doing that, watching a game of sport.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It's very boring. I think it's just the Apple News one, which just automatically pops up. But it's been down here. It would be one of the radio stations. Just tune in, see what's happening down in Melbourne.
Yep. Is there someone that you suggest that the podcast listeners should follow? Maybe someone you've been reading, or someone that you keep an eye on for advice, or that they should look up?
I think all the listeners should absolutely follow Melbourne Storm. So it's at Storm.
There we go.
But look, the chairman of the ARLC, Peter Beattie's quite funny on Twitter at different points, and his engagement with fans is certainly taking fan engagement to a new level. But he's very passionate about it. He wants to have direct conversations with fans, and that's his philosophy or mentality. So good on him.
Peter Beattie is a good follow. Even if you just with the Michael Jackson gif of eating the popcorn, you just pretty much let him put it out there, and then all the fans come in. But good on him. He goes back, answers them all, and it's just it's his passion for the game that that comes through. So if you do want to, I guess, see a high-level sports administrator engaging with fans, Peter is a good example. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? You can answer that as yourself personally, and then potentially what's working best for the Storm. Well,
there's huge growth right across the channels. Instagram, obviously, it's Storm's been hugely popular for in recent times. But for me, look, it's still I grew up with my dad's nickname was News, so for me it's still Twitter. In terms of being able to get instant access to news and actually understanding, it's quite remarkable when you think about it. And having done or studied international relations and politics at university, and Twitter is one of those incredible tools where there's you almost be a foreign correspondent from your own lounge room with the amount of information that flows through. It's quite unique and quite remarkable from that perspective. So look, that's still my MVP. I'm probably a little bit old school there, but it's still my.
No, but it is
my
from
MVP.
a breaking news or what's happening or how are people responding. I'm sure you were at the Player Awards when the Our Storm came out, and you open up the phone to find out what people are saying, what's the initial reaction. what's the media saying? You can get all that via Twitter.
And you can get so much great insights out of social media with immediate commentary and immediate feedback from for us it's fans. I'm sure the government uses it very closely around comparing what polls are saying, noting that polls in recent years have been incredibly wrong or inaccurate, as opposed to the actual election events. So whether that's the US election or Brexit or the most recent federal election in Australia, all the indications around those results based on polling was totally not the case. And whereas social media insights that these own groups doing their own research they're able to gather was far more accurate. So I think it's been able to open up the world to plenty of people, and it's quite a remarkable, influential and hugely important tool these days.
Well, thank you for taking the time. For those who don't know, like you said, you can follow the Storm on all social channels or melbournestorm.com.au. Your Twitter handle is actually now @Storm. It's gone through a few handle changes. It was originally Melbourne Storm out, and then it was Melbourne Storm, and now just Storm. Makes it much easier. Where can people find you on the internet if they're looking to connect with you?
So I'm on Twitter. I am
Dave Donaghy 11.
Dave Donaghy 11. Thank you, Sean.
That's all right.
So that's really look. It's hard enough keeping up with work, let alone keeping up with every social media app that's available these days. So look, that's probably the easiest place where people can find me if they want to drop me a line. Love to hear from you. And thanks, Sean, for coming down and showing interest in Melbourne Storm.
No worries. And like we do say, enjoy the off-season, but there really isn't much of an off-season these days.
It certainly isn't. It's a busy period of time. I think I'm heading to New Zealand at the end of this month, and the States after that. So it's no rest for the wicked. But we had a wonderful 2018. Almost the first team to go back to back. Didn't quite get there, but the postmortem's fully underway. And the planning then starts to go bigger and better in 2019. There was one
we did skip over grand final week, and there was one question I did want to ask. You've been through a few grand final weeks, and unfortunately did not get the result this week. They're always busy, they're always hectic. But last week you had the Billy Slater shoulder charge. It was meant to be happening on Monday, then it got delayed. Then it was Tuesday. You were lucky enough to have success, but there was a lot of feedback. And on the tweet that you posted coming back, for those who didn't see it, you took a photo in the private jet with you and Craig and Billy coming back, and it was some people said it was un-rugby league like. You're a media performer and media man. Was there any reason behind it? Was it just a post? What was your take on all the hot takes that came from that?
I take rugby league like as a great compliment. I think for us, we're always trying to raise the bar, and it's always challenging when you're at the top of your game to stay there. So for us, it's about how we can constantly benchmark ourselves against our peers, and not just locally but overseas, and who are doing things really well. For those that aren't aware, or those that might be international listeners, one of our greatest ever players, Billy Slater, was charged with a shoulder charge.
Potentially playing his last game and missing his last game. They were the stakes. They could not have been higher. Yeah. He's played 319 or 318 games at the time in NRL and was retiring at the end of the year, and he was looking at being suspended for that game. So huge stakes for Billy, and obviously the team is such an important player within our team. So we wanted to ensure that we did everything possible, firstly to get him off and to clear him and allow him to finish his career on his terms. I think it would have been a great shame and a travesty if he wasn't able to. So we obviously went out and got the best legal support that we could. We had the number one rugby league lawyer, if you like, based out of Sydney, who represented Bill, but we were also supported by a QC, which is quite remarkable. Having a QC support another lawyer, which is a wonderful testament of that person. But one of our partners also provided his private jet to fly up and
fly up from Melbourne to Sydney, and we'd defend Billy, and then get back on the jet and get back in time. And it wasn't us thumbing our nose at the league or at our peers or showing off or auditioning for the next episode of Ballers or Entourage. It was more about as I said, firstly we wanted to do everything we could to get Billy off, and secondly, just given the stresses that exist around it, we wanted to provide him with every opportunity to prepare as best he could for the game. So a private jet provided us with that ability
to get in and out of Sydney without all the hassles.
And essentially, it was one of the longest hearings in the history of the game, and we left the NRL at about 5 to 9. Those that have been in Sydney, that either live in Sydney or been to Sydney, know how challenging the traffic can be. 5 to 9, it's not too bad. So we'd made our way to Mascot, the airport, at about, I think, 9:15. 9:25, we were in the air. So the ability to be able to do that was wonderful. I think Billy was in his bed by about 11 o'clock. And he was at training the next day, as jumping around like a kid, which was wonderful to see. And unfortunately, as I said, we couldn't get the result. We didn't get the result we were after. But at least I can look him in the eye now and say that we did everything we could to get you right and to give you that opportunity to finish your career on your terms. Which, for a guy that's given so much to our club and our game and sport in this country, that was the least that we could do.
And it was as much also for the fans to say, we're putting everything on the line. We're this is for you, Storm fans. We're making sure we're doing everything possible to make sure everything's right. And sometimes you put out those posts, you don't really care what the wider community thinks. If your fans are all in on it and love it and are all behind it, then that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's right. And look, those posts like that, I suppose they're moments in time. And for us, like I suppose having that media background, I did get a sense that sitting on that plane on a jet, which is, as you said, was very un-rugby league. Flying up, and there was myself and Frank Panisi, our footy director, Billy Slater, and then Craig Bellamy, the head coach. And I just took a moment where I was looking around and I saw that I'm on my computer, Frank's looking at video. Billy's studying notes from the lawyer, and Craig's preparing for the game on the weekend. And I asked the flight attendant, can you just take some shots while we're not looking and just capture the moment? And so she took quite a few, and that was one that I thought, if you're actually going to sum up the week or the situation, how unique it was, I just thought it captured the moment just brilliantly. And I just wanted to share that because I thought for me, seeing Billy, given what he was going through and actually taking the time to read all those notes and not relying on someone else, given it's his
career on the line.
He was taking full ownership of it. I thought that was just so special and unique and just needed to be shared.
And that's what Social Fit's for, because normally those photos have been taken, then they end up in the middle of a book that we read 15 years time, and you go, oh, that's a great insight into that moment. And it's like, well, you've got the opportunity to share that moment now.
Oh, and don't worry, there'll be photos like that will come out, and they probably. I think at the time it's being aware of, you for that moment and that image, it was sharing the right one, and there was some after the event that we were celebrating, but that for me. Is moments that you can keep internally, and they're special for those people that were there. They weren't so much for the wider audience. And I think if I was to share those, then that would be, I could easily see why you'd be saying you're showing off then. And that's not us. We're a football club that's built on, as I said, hard work and commitment and humility, and it's important that we continue those traits because they've worked really well for us over a 20-year period.
Well, thank you very much, Dave Donaghy from Melbourne Storm. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Pleasure to come on, and thanks for having me.
Cheers.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Dave Donaghy. You can send him a tweet, Dave Donaghy, DONAGHY 11. Dave Donaghy 11 on Twitter. And as always, you can go to Sports Geek HQ to link up all the notes for this episode. You can simply put the number of the episode, sportsgeekhq.com/214. and that will link you to the show notes. Before I close for today, just a little bit of discussion about digital to dollars and how it's going from a process point of view. Very much the 5 pillars: know your audience, know your content, know your distribution, know your valuation, and then know your pitch and understand how to develop pitches for sponsors that deliver on digital. You can go to digitaltodollars.com to learn some more, or you can email me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, if you are interested in truly driving digital and really transforming your business. My goal is to help sports, is to see that digital is the number one driver for sports by 2030. I'm going to need a lot of people pulling in that direction, in the same direction as me. So I'm here to help. So if you're interested, check out digitaltodollars.com. The book is coming along. Need to put more time into the words, but it is coming along. And as I said earlier, Sports Geek Nation, you can check that out. And if you do not get Sports Geek News, which is our weekly email of the things that I read and the things that you click on, that's how we determine what gets in. That comes out every week in midweek. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGN for Sports Geek News if you would like to do so. As I said at the top, I'm going to be doing a Q&A style podcast. There'll be links shared. If you've got a question that you want me to answer, please send me an email, send me a tweet, send me a post. I will be working on getting that podcast out in a weekly fashion. So we'll see that soon, hopefully in the next 1 to 2 weeks as I get over this head cold. Hopefully James can work his magic and make me sound as amazing as I always do. Till next time, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.